Okay, folks, I want to I said that I would have dealt, take a piecemeal approach in dealing with the Aimu situation. Because a lot of people, they do things and they hide their viciousness, for want of a better word. And I hope this word is television savvy. They hide behind a cloud of dishonesty by coming on TV and professing in certain situations to be the victim of this and the victim of that. And because of our gullibility, because sometimes we don't think for ourselves, but whatever we hear on radio, our gullibility permits us to just absorb what we hear without even attempting to decipher reality from fake, or what is possible from what cannot be possible. I saw this guy on television and crying, and he had a host of documents. And I promised tonight I want to take a few minutes to deal with the accreditation of Aimu and Dr. Kenny Anthony's involvement in Aimu. Because those are the kind of things that are blown out of proportion, in my view, when there is, what they call a diffé pai can, when we make a big issue out of nothing, because apparently there is a semblance of a grievance that exists between persons, or this one doesn't like this one. There is another old saying, in other words, let us free up our consciences by attempting to speak the truth, by speaking the truth, and not because certain persons do not fall within the periphery of persons whom we like or love, that we have to chastise, castigate, and be the rumor monger that go about spreading news that essentially is so totally devoid of truth. Let me just say this. Aimu is duly accredited. Aimu is more than duly accredited. In fact, I've made certain calls to certain institutions. They have promised letters that will be sent, where Aimu's graduates currently work in this region and out of this region. So when I saw this guy on television coming to cry about what was done, what wasn't done, next week I will actually be showing a letter that was written by deceased McGlaw, the lawyer, who unfortunately has passed. He wrote a letter. He was on the disciplinary board of Aimu, and 7 years ago, he wrote a letter to the principal recommending that same student's expulsion from Aimu, because he had sensed that this man was nothing but a troublemaker. And so he is. Today he wants to extort. He's not here, he's in India. But he wants to extort a pass from the officials by saying, if you don't pass me, I'll do this. Whereupon there can be no human intervention based on how the exams are done. But let me just deal with the accreditation quickly and Dr. Kenny Anthony's involvement. Folks, I have a multiplicity of letters. I first want to show a letter signed by Honorable Stephenson King, who was then a minister of health, in which the proposals of Aimu were accepted. He signed and sent to them. This is the letter. It dealt with the accreditation of Aimu, duly signed by Honorable Stephenson King. Then there's another letter okay, that came from Ministry of Education, this time signed by Honorable Aston James as Minister of Health. Because obviously, I take it Aimu, the area falls squarely under the Ministry of Health, so there was some kind of involvement of the ministry. And thirdly, there is another letter signed by Mr. Felix and Hill, who was the permanent secretary, or probably still is. Forgive my ignorance now, or lack of contemporary knowledge. But who was at the time, for all intents and purposes, the permanent secretary. And in that letter, he says that the university has been recommended for full accreditation. So there is no question as to whether Aimu is accredited or not. There is no question about that. Dr. Kenny Anthony was a lecturer at Aimu. He lectured in legal ethics. The thing is, the request for Dr. Anthony is, now let me just say this. I hold no brief for no one. I hold no brief for Dr. Kenny Anthony. But you see, we must learn to at least attempt to be objective in our criticism. As far as I'm concerned, constructive criticism is good criticism, if it is constructive. But if you're criticizing me because you and I don't see eye to eye, I have a difficulty with that. I have a problem with that. There is nothing wrong in you not seeing eye to eye with anybody, but acknowledging the good traits that that person may have, or the good deeds that that person may have manifested. But then again, we live in a world of hypocrisy. So I'm holding no brief for Dr. Kenny Anthony. But Dr. Kenny Anthony found himself lecturing at Aimu, not at the request of any local lecturer or any local staff. The request for Dr. Kenny Anthony's involvement came from Dr. Weymouth Spence. And I hope I have the name correct. Dr. Weymouth Spence, Dr. Spence, for all intents and purposes. He is a Jamaican national, but he is the president, of Washington Adventist University. The president of Washington Adventist University, a sister university to Aimu. That's who made the request, because he knows Dr. Anthony personally. When the request was made, Dr. Anthony sent for all the documents in relation to the authenticity of the institution, whether it was accredited, whether it was this, whether it was that, and whether him, as a holder of a doctorate in laws, should be lecturing at an institution that is probably, its standing is fuzzy or questionable. So he requested all documents, and that was sent to him. It took him 6 months. 6 months to give a final decision, to give the nod. To give the nod. He gave the nod after he was fully satisfied. Now, let me just say this. I've not spoken to Dr. Kenny Anthony on this. I hold no brief for him. All I'm saying is, we must not be fooled by the testimony of one person who obviously may have his or her personal axe to grind. Let us look at the situation in its entirety and make a judgment call on that situation. So yes, 6 months, he was given the documents, went through everything, and then finally gave the nod when he realized that Aimu was no devious dubious establishment, and was duly accredited. So when I saw the young man crying on TV, and he shows documents signed by persons who work there, it is because all of them won their cut out of a $36 million lawsuit which was filed in the US. So they did everything to facilitate the filing of the lawsuit. Some of them have disappeared. They have disappeared. There is one very known local involved. She has disappeared. But there is a $36 million lawsuit which they facilitated. They facilitated. Why? Why are you facilitating a lawsuit of $36 million against an establishment where you work? Why? Why? The claimant in the matter in the US, in the transcript, said he was facilitated by persons working there. They didn't facilitate it just so. And I promise on the next show to show one, the letter that was written to this young man 7 years ago, which recommended, not written to him, but which was written recommending his expulsion from Aimu. But he got involved in a big sauce. There is a lot of money involved. So all of us, let's put our heads together. I will also get copies of the transcript where a claimant is saying that he was facilitated by employees of Aimu. He didn't say why, I don't think. Yes, the lawsuit was for 36 million US dollars. And they are trying desperately now to register a judgment of 9 million. But those involved locally, they have fled. They have fled because they never realize that what is hidden in the dark would someday come to light. When you tell me they are workers at an institution, everybody knows where Aimu is, and you're telling me management would call up head office in the States and say, look, we have an electrical problem and I want to give a man a contract to repair the electricals for $750,000? $750,000? You know, like one politician said, they want to milk the bull. You know, and then you come and cry on TV and talk a whole load of crap. Folks, injustices must never be permitted to fester as long as you can do something about them.